Welcome to Season 2 of Long Brothers Reviews, the show where sibling rivalry meets the cinema as two brothers rate and debate movies past, present, and coming soon, sometimes with recipes. Fresh off his job as a buoy, that's my brother Todd.
That's my brother Mike, and today's film is The Finest Hours, starring Chris Pine and Casey Affleck, and directed by Craig Gillespie.
This week's order was decided by a beauty pageant judged by the blind. So, Todd, you're up first.
The Finest Hours could have been a gripping account of the most successful small craft rescue in U.S. Coast Guard history, but instead it flounders like a ship without a rudder, drifting between stories and watering down the accomplishments of the men involved. Chris Pine plays Bernard Weber, a bosun's mate in the U.S. Coast Guard in 1952, who's tasked with piloting a small rescue craft across 40 and 60-foot seas to save the survivors of the SS Pendleton, an oil tanker split in half by the same storm. Meanwhile, Casey Affleck plays Ray Seibert, who's the leader of the Pendleton survivors, and must make an Apollo 13-style effort to turn what's left of their tanker into a boat that can not only stay afloat, but also be piloted to safety until help arrives. Now, the film glosses over the incredible engineering challenges that are faced by the men of the Pendleton, and Pine's portrayal of Weber kind of comes across as Forrest Gump with a double shot of NyQuil. The best thing about this film is it might generate interest in the real story of Weber and his crew, and there's a wealth of information out there that's worth reading if you've got the time. Now, The Finest Hours is not a bad film. It's just not worth going out of your way for, and at best, it's a rental for those who want to learn more about the events that were portrayed.
Well, you can critique the movie you wanted to see, my brother, or you can critique the movie that they made. And I thought the movie they made was pretty good. Was it incredibly detailed? No. Was it incredibly fascinating? No. Was it incredibly tense? No. Was it incredibly realistic? No. If you think you're an idiot, shake your head. I almost got you. The relationships portrayed were shallow, and even some of the effects were simple. But when you see that Disney logo come up at the top of the movie, come on, you know what you're in for. This wasn't going to be Apollo 13 on the high seas. This was search and rescue movie for the young adult set. That's why it was unmoored from the kinds of details we expect in a picture that's a lot more serious. Perhaps the problem here was that it was made for young teens, but was marketed as something a little more adult, a little more grown up. Kind of a mismatch. Now, I admit, I'm with you. Wasn't what I expected, wasn't what I had hoped for, but when I adjusted my expectations, not about quality, but about content, I very much enjoyed The Finest Hours.
I'm critiquing the movie I saw, which is the one they made, and they had great source material here, and they just left it. I worked in television news promotion for years and years and years, and there's a term we always used to use that you always wanted to avoid like the plague, and that was anticipation. You didn't want to build up a story as going to be this great, fascinating, worthwhile thing to watch, and then it turned out just to be a colossal waste of time. It's kind of what you had here. You had some material here that could have been a very fascinating story, very riveting story, very tense story to watch. They just kind of left it laying flat.
I was watching and I thought, what would I have done to make it more realistic, to make it more, I don't want to use the word adult because that's the wrong connotation, but to feel like you were getting inside these characters' heads and lives. And I thought none of the things that they're saying really take us to those places. We didn't see any really personal moments between Chris Pine and his fiancée. We didn't know the backstory of the guy who was on the Pendleton as it was sinking, and he was in charge of running. He was just this fellow who we've been told is an expert, and there you go. We didn't know much about their lives. That's the sort of addition that would have made this a really great picture.
And there's kind of a backstory that is kind of, again, just kind of barely glossed over that kind of where they try to explain why the Weber character has this lack of self-confidence and this guilt, and they kind of allude to this tragedy that happened a year prior, and he every now and then he bumps into someone whose brother he couldn't save or something, but they don't dive into it all that much, and it's supposed to be this nice little side story that culminates in a scene between his fiancée and this dead man's widow, but they don't really dive into it enough to really make it worth something that they should have pursued.
There's some silliness at the end that you and I had talked about before this, and it's the convenience of how this wraps up. The heart of the picture, and this gives nothing away, is
Let's just say there might be a spoiler here.
the heart of the, we know they survive. So
Yep.
the heart of the picture is getting over the bar, the sandbar, out into the ocean. And this takes probably 20 minutes of the picture, I'd guess. When they come back over the bar, though, they don't have any trouble at all. And they dismiss this with one character going, I guess a big wave carried us over the bar.
Yes, the tide was high,
Yes.
to quote Blondie.
And apparently, although it was pitch dark, all they had to do was turn on the light and they could see that they were basically wading distance from shore the whole time.
They lose the compass trying to go over the bar. So they're out there trying to find this boat in a monstrous storm, pitch black. Really knowing where they are because they can't navigate by the stars because of the storm. So, and they find the boat. I'll give in that, well, obviously it did happen. So, sure, he finds the boat out there. But then they're like, okay, now we got to get back. We got no compass. We've been driving around the ocean for an hour, and we don't really know where we are. So they're like, well, the wind was blowing that way before, so let's just make sure it's blowing the other way on the way back.
Because the wind doesn't change.
Right, maybe. So here they go. Now, what they don't know is that they think we'll see the lights of the shore and it'll guide us home. No, power has gone out on the island where they're from. They don't know this, of course. So they're just driving along, and meanwhile, his girlfriend has a Radar O'Reilly-inspired moment that they'll just all drive to the pier and turn their headlights on. The entire eastern seaboard, he drives that boat straight to that one pier in pitch black darkness. How does he pull that off?
Another question about this ship. They go out in this rescue boat, and they're gone for, I don't know, a dozen or more hours, I'd guess. They were gone for a long time.
I don't know what. It's a full day.
And apparently it's a full tank or it's nuclear. Because there's never a concern that they might possibly run out of fuel and be lost at sea in this little 24-foot boat. That never crosses anybody's mind. Let's go. We don't know how far out it is. We don't know how far back it is, but let's just go. And
you never even see a shot of the gas gauge or anything. Like nobody even thought to think, hey, you think we ought to,
Not even that screenplay moment where it dips to E and then they tap it with their finger and it comes back up. Not even that.
The guys are out there on the Pendleton and they're stranded, and it turns out everything would have been fine and they would have been perfectly safe if not for the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department causing all these problems and making it look like there was a storm and all these problems that came up. So I think there's something a little fishy going on there. So that's it for this episode of Long Brothers Reviews. Thanks for watching, and check us out on Facebook and Twitter to find out more or to ask us questions about your favorite films.
So, until next time, that's my buoy brother, Todd.
And that's my brother Mike saying, please discard your trash as you exit the theater.